Okay, let's talk about the Belly is an unreliable narrator argument, because while Belly is something of a very specific type of unreliable narrator, the term is definitely being misused in that when something doesn't happen the way people want it to, they cry unreliable, and also in a way to explain how Conrad's bad behavior never actually happened and Jeremiah was actually a covert narcissistic manipulator the whole time who never actually cared about Belly and never actually was good or kind. Just off the bat, if part of your take is that Belly and Jeremiah are unreliable, but Conrad is the reliable one, you have lost all credibility, and I need you to take yourself outside and learn to be serious, because please. But first of all, really quickly, as far as the show, Belly really does not have the capability to be an unreliable narrator in the way that she is being painted, because the show is told to us largely by an omniscient narrator that sees everything and things that Belly and Jeremiah would not be able to see. You get little lines of narration from Belly and Jeremiah in episode 5 of season 2, and those things are filtered through their own feelings and experiences and unique knowledge. But are we to believe that those events are shown to us incorrectly or in ways that didn't happen? No. If Jeremiah is narrating, are we to believe that these memories or events that are unfolding did not happen the way he is saying they are because he is a consistent liar or something? Because what, he lied about that godforsaken firework in season 1? No, absolutely not. And if that's the case, then Conrad will absolutely be unreliable as well, because he has been shown to lie quite a few times. You all just ignore it. And people love to bring up this moment from season 1 where Cleveland says that Laurel's book has an unreliable narrator, and Laurel is like, huh, what are you talking about? And Cleveland says, well, it's just obvious that Iris is telling us not the real story about her marriage. And Laurel's like, I don't know about that. And I think that says it all. A first-person narrative is their story. Everybody is telling their story. We are not to believe based on that they are misconstruing events or lying. Now, Book Belly is unreliable, first of all, in the way that every first-person POV is, in that it's only their perspective, and also she could fall into a specific category of unreliable narrator, the naive, a narrator whose perception is limited by their lack of knowledge, maturity, age, perspective, etc. This is not a narrator that misconstrues events or lies or tells events as they didn't happen. Belly's narration is of course filtered through her own preconceived notions and insecurities, as well as the fact that she is a 16, 15, 10-year-old girl throughout the stories, and she just doesn't know everything. She can't possibly know everything. She is often missing pieces of information, like, for example, she's the only one who doesn't know about Susanna's cancer throughout the first book. Yes, both boys know. Likewise, Belly often jumps to conclusions about people's intentions and presents them as fact to the reader. She does this with both boys, with Taylor, with her mom, with Susanna. Like, he only did this because he knew it would make me mad. Jeremiah only did this because he wanted to make Taylor jealous. My mom doesn't care about my feelings. Taylor is jealous of me. Taylor thinks she's better than me, right? Sometimes she operates under false assumptions or misinformation or pieces of information that she's missing. But are we given any evidence or led to believe that she is telling the events or telling us people's actions or words as they didn't happen, or that these things didn't happen as she's saying them, regardless of how she might interpret them? No. So number one, I'm assuming people are using this in literal book 3, which again, I do not like this book, but there's this one scene where she recounts this memory of Jeremiah finding a dog, and Jeremiah's like, that wasn't me, that was Conrad. And Belly's like, oh my gosh, like, I have been so sure about that memory, like, what else had I misremembered? And this apparently says to all of you this one thing, that everything Belly told us was a lie, and obviously we should have known all along that Jeremiah was a covert narcissist and a jerk and never cared about her, and that Conrad was just like madly in love with her, even though he never said it to her and was very cruel and lied and didn't put any effort into showing her that. You gotta do better than that. And I will say, I do think this is a little silly. Like, obviously this is supposed to be like a nod to her being like a little bit unreliable, right? But this really doesn't seem like something that she would misremember about Conrad, because she remembered everything about him like so carefully. But either way, that little paragraph does not prove her to have misrepresented events. The other thing, this polar bear, Junior Mint, is not an example of this. Conrad does take her to the boardwalk to see the other girl, as far as we know. He admits it in book 2 that he tried to hook up with that girl, and then in those after the fact letters that were only released years after the fact, so if it hinges on that, it's not very good, but even in them, he does not say he didn't go to the boardwalk to see the girl, but that he must have spent 30 or 40 bucks trying to get her the bear. No indication that it wasn't a consolation prize. And I think what a lot of us find really dissatisfying about this third book is that Conrad's behavior in books 1 and 2, and even in this one, were so bad that there was nothing amongst it that made us want to root for him as Belly's love interest, or made us want to have some kind of redemption. And this redemption isn't even that. It's his point of view claiming that, oh, I did love her. I just did this because I couldn't love her right, despite the fact that he was cruel and lied to her and never admitted feelings and never put forth effort to do that, and never even apologized for any of that behavior, and does the same thing in this book where he admits the night before the wedding and then takes it back the next day. Not that Jeremiah is the villainous, egotistical, lazy jerk that so many people make him out to be in this book, but if the whole thing is supposed to rest on, well, Conrad was a jerk the whole time, and Jeremiah was really good to her the whole time, but it's only because Belly was unreliable, it's like, come on. Regardless, I think the takeaway is, even if, let's say, Belly misremembered a small detail here or there, if Belly, even as she gets older, is telling us that Conrad gives and he takes away, and she feels insecure with him, and he doesn't show her that he loves her, and she's questioning his love all the time, does that say something about his actions and why she might have been led to feel that way? Even if he's layered and we know he reveals himself to love her at the last minute there. Likewise, if Jeremiah is indeed revealed to be a complex human, but Belly views him as someone who has always been good to her, always looked out for her, always been her friend, made her feel comfortable and happy and loved, it's probably because he did a lot of things to show her that, especially when he's the one that she actually spends a lot of time with and just factually does know better, right? Ultimately, it's up to the reader to look at people's actions and what's happening around Belly and temper that with her perceptions and why she might have those perceptions. If I was really intentionally supposed to get out of these books that Jeremiah was an egotistical manipulator the whole time, and I should have known Conrad actually had a heart of gold and his behavior was purely out of good saintly motivation, and he was the good one all along, and Jeremiah was actually Joe Goldberg and we're watching a psychological thriller, then terrible job. Terrible job. See, the thing is, my friend, this is really funny, number one, but Belly and Conrad might as well just be a nickname pseudonym for Bella and Edward, because that's exactly what it is, and very often I am saying the exact same I have been saying this for quite some time now, but as most of you probably know, I spend a good amount of time talking about Twilight, and the thing is, even when I'm not talking about Twilight, 9 times out of 10, I'm still talking about Twilight, and the fandom arguments are almost exactly the same. This Bonrad is absolutely this, absolutely Bellward, older, brooding dillwagon who views the main character as like a child and a kid, but then conveniently pursues her. She's obsessed with him, idolizes him. They don't have any relationship development. They're never even friends. The entire romance skates by on this concept of forever or infinity that we're not shown at all, and her worship of this guy. And then this, of course, is absolutely sweet, dependable best friend with a biblical J name who calls her Bells, that is in love with her, understands her, can read her mind, is sunshine and smiles. They share an emotional connection, spend a lot of time in cars, very forthright and direct about his feelings, affectionate. They're big on hand holding and hugging and spinning around. Like they're very into it, and she is in love with biblical J name too, but she's still, of course, idealizing and hung up on brooding dillwagon. Belly, where have you been? Mr. Cam Cameron is the harmless third dude who is a fun little side character, but never really had a shot. Something like a Mike Newton, if you will. well. And then we have the typically girly, fashionable, blunt, funny, like other girls friend who is overhated for being a teenage girl and is really not so very different than Belly or Bella, but alas, even if she's often correct and just being a regular teenage girl. And then we also have the two parents who are longtime childhood best friends themselves, and then their children connect. Did you know that Charlie and Billy have been best friends since childhood? Because they have. So all this to say that you are correct, and the fandom, like, arguments and discourse are so absurdly similar. It's so funny and kind of haunting. But here I am anyway. So Belly has to walk on eggshells with Jeremiah is one of the most nonsensical things I've heard spewed recently, and I've heard a lot because what they're referring to is either him being upset at the appropriate time for something that is upsetting, or calmly setting boundaries about something he has every right to set boundaries about. So both in the books and the show, Jeremiah is established as somebody who Belly feels comfortable with, she can be herself with, she doesn't have to question herself with, her safe harbor. He calls him for help when she needs it. She goes to him when she feels upset or lost. They are very comfortable with each other. They're very comforting to each other. That's such like a pillar of their relationship. Jeremiah, our mirror ball, feels like he doesn't have to perform for her. Like it's the whole like central factor of their relationship. If we really want to go there, Conrad is the one who she has to question herself with and question their relationship. But this is not about Cornroad. First thing I see you all bringing up is Thanksgiving and that Jeremiah like threw a fit. And I just want to know, like, is the fit in the room with us right now? Because that is not what happened. Jeremiah was perfectly pleasant and polite and calm at Thanksgiving dinner while Belly and Conrad were holding hands and being coupley in front of him. And then he very calmly and privately set a boundary with Conrad and said, if you're going to be here together, I don't want to be around. Give me a heads up. That's literally it. He didn't say, why did you bring her here? Like, how could you do that to me? He didn't, like, raise his voice or go crazy. Like, I don't understand why you have a problem with him setting a boundary. And then the other supposed example of this is this conversation on the beach where Belly starts going on about, well, I had no idea that he begged you for my blessing. And you're all mad that he didn't want to be Belly's talk therapist about Conrad when all he literally said was, can you not? Miss, why don't you want to kiss me? Tries to kiss him the night before, like literally actively pursuing Jeremiah, and he doesn't want to hear about Conrad from her. I know you guys like don't actually pay attention or care about him, but like literally just like major plot point. Let me remind you, not a year earlier, Belly made her intentions to Jeremiah clear and then got with his brother the day he found out that his mom was dying, and then also dipped at his mom's funeral to go fight with said brother when she said she was going to spend time with him. Like, I don't know why you're surprised that he's like wary about this, and he didn't do anything crazy. He literally just said, can you not? And he doesn't want to hear her defend Conrad when they're talking like in this specific situation. And even then, like, he was very like forgiving and still comforted her. Like, it's not just you, Belly. Like, me and Conrad are mad about each other about all kinds of things. Like, even with these things that he's setting, like, he's still super forgiving and easygoing about it. So I really don't understand what the problem is. I just like to hear another example of when Belly has to censor herself or walk on eggshells with Jeremiah. There isn't one. Like, they're super open. He's super easygoing, forgiving, understanding, like a great listener with her. Like, I don't understand why we don't get why this is like a sore spot for Jeremiah and something that he like is going to say something about here. And how is that unreasonable, and how does that equate to walking on eggshells? Like, that just doesn't make any sense, especially since so much of Jeremiah's experience and his characterization is like people walking all over him and just like expecting him to be fine and like, oh, he doesn't care about anything. He doesn't take anything seriously, and then he's just like, yeah, I don't want to hear about this actually, and then he's the villain. And it just gets me because he's still like very sweet, very forgiving, like softens easily. Like it's just annoying. Just like I'm still waiting for somebody to provide me one example of Conrad challenging Belly or helping her to grow in a positive way, like Steven said. Crickets every time. So I get asked a lot about my predictions for season 3 of The Summer I Turned Pretty, and I will talk about that. But specifically right now, I want to talk about the plot of the 3rd book and why including that or sticking to that plot would be a very, very bad look for them and in poor taste for a lot of reasons. While I've never had much confidence in a Jelly endgame as much as I would love that, I do have some confidence that they are not sticking to the plot line of this lovely book because, number one, I know that all the Bonrads are waiting for, well, just wait until Jeremiah cheats on Belly, and let's just get it out of the way. Jeremiah did not cheat on Belly. They were explicitly broken up. You can check my pinned video where I broke it all down with the receipts. I'm not entertaining that. He didn't cheat on her. But either way, the point is, if they included that Cabo plotline, Lacey Barone, or something similar where Jeremiah quote-unquote cheats, it would be such a bad look, very evil, and also just like kind of wouldn't work because, number one, it would just kind of be like anticlimactic and lame with all the cheating and cheating adjacent things that have already happened in the show, particularly when Jeremiah is the only one who doesn't have something in his history that makes him like, oh, like that's a little iffy, like this person might cheat. You all like to talk about how, oh, it totally makes sense that Jeremiah would cheat because he hooks up with a lot of people. Jeremiah was single. Everybody else, like literally Belly, Conrad, Steven, Taylor, they all have something that was kind of like a little cheaty. Jeremiah has nothing like that. Jeremiah is actually the only one who made certain that his desired love interest, Belly, was entirely single before he made a move, and he was single himself. Nobody else can really say that. The second reason that would be ick and dirty is because they have reinvented Conrad for the show and written out or excused almost all of his worst behaviors, gave him these uniquely sympathetic angles that he does not have in the books, and like excused away and wrote off his behavior with like panic attacks and this and that. And a lot of this was at Jeremiah's expense. Like, as much as I love Show Jer, and I adore him, that's Pookie, he's unfairly adapted in like some ways. So if they were to do all those favors for Conrad, but then still totally like stick Jer with that, it would be really dirty and really ugly and very telling. And then the third reason is because with the decision to make Jeremiah bi in the show, making their only prominently bi character have like a prominent downfall or storyline centered around cheating would be extremely ick. And all of you standing for that, gross. I know that like you need something to propagate Bonrad because they just like don't have a lot going for them as a ship, but that's ick if that's what you're rooting for. As you guys know, I'm not a fan of this book at all. Like, I think it's very sloppy for a lot of reasons, but the like rushed marriage thing I thought to be out of character for both Jeremiah and Belly. Not that I think it was sinister or manipulative or anything like that. Jeremiah is not the villainous, lazy, egotistical, manipulative jerk that he's made out to be in this book at all. But unless they're like aged up significantly in season 3, this like engagement plot really doesn't work for the direction that the show has taken, for the changes made to the show, or for today's audiences. Like, it was dated then, to be honest, and it was like a little, it was very, not even a little, it was very weird and very like, really, like Belly and Jeremiah, even in the books, that seemed very off for them. It would seem even more off for like show Belly and Jeremiah, again, unless like maybe they're like greatly aged up. But still, I don't know that they're going to go there. I will say that there is a lot of sort of nods to like wedding stuff in the show. So I get why people think that they're hinting at that. But I also think that might just be like nodding to things that happen in the book. Like the whole Deb Ball thing, which does not happen in the books. It does sort of parallel like the Belly and Jeremiah wedding a little bit. Like we do see Belly and Jeremiah like walking through arches. Of course, my future wife. But I do kind of think those might just be nods, you know, because we see nods to other things that happen in the book that don't end up happening in the show, but there's like a little nod to it, and I kind of think that might be it. I don't necessarily see them going through with this wedding thing. And while there are some things I want to see out of season 3, like I just do not want the grief. I do not want to see the evil done to Jer Bear and to Jelly. I do want to see them cuddle. My boyfriend, my Jeremiah, you'll never be what Jer is to me. He's my best friend. He doesn't take his love away when he feels like it. The downy softness of his neck. When I looked at him, I saw past, present, and future. He was the one, my one. I do want to see, but like, if you're really standing for that cheating plot to be included, and like even this marriage, like it's a bad look. Like, reevaluate, because no way. You know how Jeremiah calls Belly Bells and we all love it so much? So I have to clear up another piece of Team Conrad propaganda misinformation that people are spreading. Apparently people are saying that this was Conrad's thing in the books and we stole it. Absolutely not. Nope, nope, nope. Bells is proven to be a Jeremiah thing in the books too. Let me explain with receipts. In the books, we can infer that Bells is something that maybe they all called her when she was much younger, but only Jeremiah uses it in present day. The first time we hear Bells is in chapter 17 by Jeremiah when he says, "But you were the best Bells," and he uses Bells consistently throughout books 1, 2, and 3. And I will show you, but Conrad only refers to Belly as Bells 2 times total, only in this book. It is mentioned to be out of the ordinary, and like it is in the show, dare I say, a bit manipulative. Conrad refers to Belly as Bells, and she romanticizes it as some kind of like out of the ordinary thing, implying that he doesn't actually ever call her this, when this whole book, like, Jeremiah has been calling her Bells. So this is weird for Conrad, and this is when he is in the doling out breadcrumbs stage of their breadcrumbing. So if you interpret this as like a really flirty romantic scene, like fine, but just not here. So he says, "Sure, good night, Bells, my nickname from 1,000 years ago. He made it so hard not to love him. When he was sweet like this, I remembered why I did. Used to love him, I mean. I remembered everything." Okay, this is like not really the biggest thing to romanticize Belly, but again, like your nickname from 1,000 years ago, which means like he hasn't been calling you this, but Jeremiah has been calling her this the whole time. And by the way, since that scene is a callback to the Conrad teaching Belly to slow dance scene, I'll have you know that they rewrote that scene in the show. They made Conrad look a whole lot better and more intentional. In the book, Conrad does it because his mom asks him to, and Jeremiah is already dancing with Susanna. So again, not sinister, but not some token of Conrad's sainthood or the fact that he was always in love with Belly like you all seem to make it out to be. They did a lot of favors from the show and also removed so many of Jeremiah's traits. But again, this is not suggesting that this was like Conrad's nickname for her, because the only other time we hear it besides Jeremiah consistently using it is Susanna writing it on her birthday cake, again suggesting that they all used to call her that, but Jeremiah has never stopped calling her that, so she doesn't think it's weird when Jeremiah does it. And then the only other time Conrad calls her Bells is before the go look in the mirror some more scene where she's gonna walk away and he says, "Come on, Bells." And she's like talking about how he's being nice to her one minute and cold the next. So if you ask me, him calling her this is a little bit, you know? And that's why I thought that it was super interesting that they had Conrad call Belly Bells when he was being a jerk and trying to get at them, because that kind of is how it was in the book too. And then in book 2, Bells is used 6 total times, all by Jeremiah. And then in book 3, 9 times total, all by Jeremiah. None by Conrad, except those 2 times, questionable times, in the first book. So this is a Jeremiah thing too. This is reminding me of when I recently had to educate everybody, because for some reason people were under the impression that Edward refers to Bella as honey in the books when he does not. That was Jacob, which proves to me that you all just get on here and say anything. But fun fact, Jacob also calls Bella Bells in the book. Edward does not. No Team Conrad propaganda here. Stop spreading misinformation. And to everybody who makes the compilations of Jeremiah calling Belly Bells and the "Good morning, Bells," thank you. Bless you. You are such a gift, and I watch everyone all the way through every time. All right, the time has come to discuss the infamous letters that Conrad writes to Belly while she's studying abroad in Spain. Now, the thing about the letters is that Conrad enthusiasts and defenders love to use these letters as Conrad's like redemption and proof that he always liked her or like how good he is. And in addition to actually providing neither of those things, these letters were not even included in the books originally. Like, my original copies do not even have these letters in them. They were added years after the fact, like talk about an afterthought. So if his redemption and goodness hinges on that, that's not very good, and you have to understand that. And if you are expecting some epically romantic writing or like Captain Wentworth's letter or something, I wouldn't blame you by the way that Bonrad's hyped this up, but boy, are you in for a disappointment, because these letters range from like mid at best to rude and backhanded and vaguely racist. Context of these letters, quickly, before we begin, is we never see Belly and Conrad actually be in a relationship. We never see them be friends. Conrad is horrendous throughout books 1 and 2. Not that he's good in book 3, but they reinvented him in the show. Doesn't apologize for anything. His redemption supposedly lies in book 3 and these after the fact letters. Yet in book 3, he pulls the same BS and doesn't even admit that he has feelings for Belly or loves her or anything like that until like a day before she's about to marry Jeremiah, then takes it back the next day. The wedding doesn't happen, not because Belly chooses Conrad, she chooses Jeremiah, but because he calls it off. Then she vaguely goes off to study abroad in Spain. We don't really hear much about it. And then there's a 1-page endgame of Belly and Conrad getting married with this really pathetic paragraph about him. Not even a paragraph, barely a paragraph that like pales in comparison to the one that she wrote about Jeremiah. But let's dive in. First letter. And first of all, I'd like to say that I really do not like Laurel's involvement in these letters. I have my words about Laurel and her Team Conrad agenda and that entire family and their Team Conrad agenda, but that's for another time. So this is the first letter where he sends her Junior Mint, and everybody uses this as like, see, like he always loved her. Like he didn't go there to flirt with that girl. He never says here that he didn't go there to flirt with that girl. In book 2, he admitted he tried to hook up with that girl. So he says, like he sends it to her and he says, I probably spent like 30 or 40 bucks trying to win you that bear. Okay, like that's nice, but there's nothing in this that like indicates it wasn't a consolation prize. So that's not, I don't see how that's like soulmate stuff, but whatever. This is one of the better letters, by the way. He says, firstly, I don't even know if I should be writing you if this is allowed. I hope it's allowed. I hope you don't throw this away without even opening the box, because if you do, you'll miss out on something very important. Okay, fine. Something that was once very important to you. I went over to your house to fix your mom's computer. I went into your room to use the printer and I saw Junior Mint sitting on the bookshelf looking incredibly pathetic. Remember him? Polar bear, wears glasses and a very stylish scarf. I won him for you at the ring toss. Do you remember how you used to go and look at the polar bears, blah, blah, blah. Probably spent 30 or 40 bucks to win you that bear. Apparently, he misses you irrespective of the fact that you left him behind. He feels lost without you. I'm serious. That's what he told me. Pathetic, right? So here he is. Be nice to him with you. So here is Conrad once again reminding Belly that he exists. But whatever, you want to romanticize that, fine. Now the next letter is the Sour Patch one, and here you will see that Conrad only knows that Belly likes Sour Patch Kids because Laurel tells him that. That was not something in the book. In the book, we can talk about this again. Belly does like Swedish Fish, and the gas station scene is Belly's stomach rumbling and Jeremiah running into the gas station to get her crackers while Conrad sits there and does nothing. I don't like this letter. I think it's rude. He says, Dear Belly, this is weird writing you like this. I think the last time I wrote someone an actual letter was a thank you card to my grandma. For graduation money, I think. My mom was big on thank you cards. Oh, by the way, you're welcome for Junior Mint. Laura told me you said thanks. Geez, I was hoping for a thank you card, but I guess we can't all be as polite as me. Haha. Yeah, you're so funny, Cornroach. I should be working on biochem, but I'd rather be talking to you. Laurel says your Spanish is getting better. She told me you got lost the other day trying to hunt down a pack of Sour Patch Kids. Sour Patch Kids? Really? You're too grown up for Junior Mint, but not Sour Patch Kids, huh? You don't have to nag her about the Sour Patch Kids. Here's the biggest bag I could find. It's economy size. Next time I see you, I'm sure you'll be toothless, but happy. I really do hope you're happy. This one is just terrible and speaks for itself. Dear Belly, so far I've written you 2 letters and you've written me, well, none, which is fine. Go ahead and feel free not to write me back. Seriously, don't feel obligated or anything, even though I've sent you 2 handwritten letters and 2 gifts. Yeah, wonderful. But seriously, don't write back. I'm serious. It's better this way. I like getting my news secondhand from Laurel. Speaking of news, she told me you met some Spanish guy named Benito and he rides around on a scooter. Really, Belly? A guy named Benito with a scooter? He probably wears leather pants and has a long stringy ponytail. I don't even want to know. Don't tell me. He probably looks like a model and weighs 100 pounds and writes you poetry in Spanish. I don't know what you see in a guy like that, but I don't know what you ever saw in me either. Same, cornstarch. So I guess there's no accounting for taste, right? Don't forget, don't write back, Conrad. If you think that letter is like good or romantic, reevaluate, because everything about that was a major absolutely not. This next one actually makes me want to rage. He says, Dear Belly, you didn't write back. I thought for sure you would. You used to be so bad at following directions. Now look at you. Kidding. Actually, I'm not. Remember that time you tried to make boxed potatoes au gratin and you forgot to put in the cheese? Speaking of potatoes au gratin, your mom made some for Thanksgiving. Laurel invited us to dinner, my dad and Jer and me. I wasn't sure if Jer would come. He shouldn't have. But he did. It was awkward as hell. But then Steven put on football and we all just sat and watched and it was better. During the half, Jer asked if I'd heard from you and I said no. He said you'd been chatting online. He said you'd cut your hair shorter, that it makes you look older, more mature. Then Laura showed us pictures of when she came to visit you. I want to go there someday. I heard you aren't hanging out with that guy Benito anymore. Don't say I didn't warn you. By the way, it looks good, your hair. I don't think it makes you look older though. Younger, if anything. I might as well be completely honest here, because who even knows if you're reading this? You might have thrown it out without opening it, which is your right, but I'll go ahead and say it. It killed me a little that Jer's seen you and talked to you. Let me finish before I rage about that one, but I don't think he hates me anymore, which is the important thing. Also, in case I haven't made it clear, I think about you a lot. You're pretty much all I think about, just so we're clear. Conrad. Okay, first of all, I understand why Jeremiah showed up at that Thanksgiving, because he has a really big heart. And because, like, he doesn't want to be alone because he doesn't have any other family. But nobody at that Thanksgiving table honestly deserves to see him, and nobody there values him. And oh my God, I hate that he was there and that Conrad has the audacity to be like, well, it really killed me that Jer is talking to you. Maybe because Jeremiah is her best friend, was her best friend for like most of her life, and they actually dated for 2 years, and you did what? Had a situationship, treated her poorly, then confessed the day before her wedding? You have to be kidding me. And then he pulls that thing like, oh, he said your hair makes you look older and more mature, but I think it makes you look younger. It's giving, Jared doesn't take anything seriously. It's not like it is with us. And you, oh! Last one, and thank God, because I'm tired of hearing from Corny the Clown. Dear Belly, it's Christmas here. I guess it's Christmas where you are too. I went to the summer house for a few days. I kept thinking I'd turn around and see you, stuffing your face with chocolate pretzels or sliding around the downstairs living room in those god-awful mistletoe pajama pants. I bet my mom bought them for you. Can you ever just not? She used to buy Jeremy matching Christmas sweaters. There's one horrible family portrait of us all in red button-downs and reindeer bow ties. It's basically a blight on humanity. I hid it in the attic one night and no one's seen it since. If you've been a very good girl this year, maybe I'll show you when you come back. My gift to you. Oh, you're kidding. I hate his like be a good girl thing. It's so ick, and I want to talk about that, but are you kidding me? You know what you could give me? A letter back. Hell, I'll even take a postcard or an email, anything. I just want to hear from you. Too bad. I want to know how you're doing. By the time you get this, Christmas will have passed. I hope it was a nice one. Merry Christmas, Belly. Remember last year, me and you at the summer house? Best Christmas of my life. That's sick. She was with Jeremiah. Love Conrad. I think that speaks for itself. I agree with all of you who say I think these letters kind of count as harassment. I think so too. I think they're backhanded, nasty, negging. Jeremiah deserves so much better than this clown convention. And you gush over these? Serious? The thing that really gets me about the Jeremiah is a manipulative, narcissistic villain takes, and they're planting seeds, if you read book 3, you'd know, is not only that it's like insanely, wildly hypocritical because they have blindfolds on when it comes to Conrad, and not only that, as much as I dislike book 3, Jeremiah is not the evil, narcissistic, uncaring, lazy, villainous jerk that he's made out to be in that book. Not just that, but all this stuff that you're using to vilify Jeremiah and paint him as an evil, sneaky, manipulative villain, and all these things that you're using to prove that Conrad is better than him do not exist in the books. Like, you cannot simultaneously use show exclusive things to praise Conrad and then condemn Jeremiah for book 3, which hasn't happened in the show. And I've already discussed the cheating thing a lot. He didn't cheat on Belly. They were explicitly broken up. But why are you standing, regardless, why are you standing for their only prominently bi character, because they made the decision to make Jeremiah bi in the show, to be taken down and involved in some cheating plot? Like, do you realize how ick that is? Especially with all the cheating and cheating adjacent things that have already happened in the show, and the fact that it doesn't make sense for Jeremiah. But like, even if it did, like, you want that. You want the amount of biphobia that would welcome and present. Like, that's ick. But like, if you're gonna condemn Jeremiah for book 3, talk about book Conrad. Talk about the fact that there is no firework in the books. There is no tire scene. There is no, oh, he's sneaking around and lurking in the books. Not that I think any of those things make show Jeremiah a villain or evil or even unkind or caring. In the very least, I love show Jer, but like, you have to acknowledge that. Acknowledge that they reinvented Conrad for the show, and a lot of that was at Jeremiah's expense. Acknowledge how both Conrad and Jeremiah knew the whole time about Susanna's cancer in book 1, and Jeremiah simply didn't act like that. How Jeremiah was the one cleaning up after Conrad. Acknowledge how Conrad is the one who starts the fight, and acknowledge the fact that the fight happens because Conrad and Belly are fighting, and he grabs and shakes her, and Jeremiah sees it and intervenes. Talk about how Conrad is the one who doesn't apologize for anything in the books. Talk about his dialogue in the books. Talk about how they rewrote their relationship, how they didn't have a relationship, Conrad and Belly. In the books, they didn't have one, how he never admitted feelings until the night before her wedding. Talk about how those nice flashbacks that you think prove something don't even happen in the books. Talk about how the dancing one was rewritten in Conrad's favor, how in the books he only does it because Susanna asked him to, and Jeremiah was already dancing with Susanna. Talk about how there's no infinity pancake. Talk about how Conrad was not the one to include Belly when they were kids in the books. Talk about how Conrad never even spent time alone with her. Talk about how they really eliminated much of Jeremiah and Belly's close relationship and all their sweet moments and flashbacks when they were kids. How Jeremiah was the one who ditched the boys for her and spent time with her. Talk about how much they cut out Jeremiah and Belly's relationship and closeness and gave a lot of that to Conrad when Conrad and Belly were never close in the books. Talk about how the Sour Patch Kid thing doesn't happen in the books. How Belly likes Swedish Fish in the books, and the gas station scene is Jeremiah getting out of the car and getting Belly crackers when he hears her stomach rumble, and Conrad sitting there and doing nothing. Like, if you want to analyze the show exclusively, fine. I like reading into things too, and I do think a lot of those takes are completely unfair because you have people saying things like their little cereal milk tradition shows that Jeremiah was like taking from Belly, but Conrad's "what do you give me if I do?" That's not anything like please. And Jeremiah's a manipulative, abusive narcissist for getting upset about things that he has every right to get upset about, or when he finally like speaks up for himself or gets angry after being like polite and pleasant 95% of the time. But Conrad in the car was just sassy Conrad. Like, come on. But if you're going to analyze the show, you can't use book 3 against Jeremiah, because then you have to talk about book Conrad and book Jeremiah, but you never want to do that. Like, it's so convenient. I have something else to say about the Sour Patch Kids and the Swedish Fish, actually, that I want everyone to know, and about Conrad in general, because as much as a lot of us were originally quite upset about this Sour Patch Kids, Swedish Fish candy scene, because it was such a deviation from the books in Conrad's favor, and with Jeremiah, like, remembering so many things about Belly, we were like, why would they add that? Like, that's such an annoying little, like, Conrad moment that like didn't need to happen. That like kind of did make sense. But even with that, the jokes about Cornflake and the bare minimum still write themselves. Because number one, Cornroach didn't even like go in there to be altruistic and get candy. Like, he just put it up there to be like, don't waste your money, buddy. She likes these better, just to like antagonize him about like, I know Belly better, as he was doing in the car. Like, did you know she gets motion sickness? And it's like, yeah, like I did know that. She took Dramamine to help you study. Like, Conrad didn't notice that, right? And he's been doing that the whole car ride. But then the really funny thing, after all that, Mr. Mature Grow Up leaves Jeremiah to pay for it. So as usual, people are hard eyes over cornstarch and the most bare minimum thing. Not only that, but Jeremiah paid for it. You're gagging over the Sour Patch that Jeremiah paid for. Is the same thing as everybody hyping up Clown Man for producing that crumpled up sweater for Belly, but it was only after Jeremiah first noticed that she was cold. Even with all the favors that the show did him, it's like, oh, well, Corny remembers all the little things and Jeremiah does the heavy lifting both times. And that's the gag. It's like never actually about Floprad himself and like what he does or what makes him a good love interest. I forgot he caught a cheeseburger. And just a little reminder, in the book, Belly likes Swedish Fish. Conrad only knows that Belly likes Sour Patch Kids because Laurel tells him, and this is only in those horrendous letters that were added after the fact. And he also like negs her about the Sour Patch Kids in these beautifully romantic letters. And the gas station scene in the book is Belly's stomach rumbling and Jeremiah getting up and getting her crackers without saying anything, and Conroach sitting there and doing nothing. So stay romanticizing the Sour Patch Kids that Jeremiah paid for. And the infinity necklace that he didn't give her and she found in a dirty contraceptive-filled top drawer. and him catching a cheeseburger. I wouldn't do this if I didn't get bombarded every day, even in my own comment section, with somebody twisting every moment of dialogue, every action of Jeremiah's to make him out to be some manipulative, narcissistic villain who is always self-serving and taking things from people, and how the symbolism shows that he's actually selfish and evil and insufficient and blah, blah. But you know what the really sad thing is? That this absolutely cursed, creepy, what'll you give me if I do line is from the book, and they still chose to keep it in the TV show. You see, this was actually written on paper, and I had to read it. And not only that, I had to walk with the knowledge that this guy was the endgame love interest. And not only that, he got shut down. And then the really sad thing is that not only that, but he recycled it in the book as well. The what else do I get? Just the cheeseburgers was also in the book. So I not only had to read it, I had to watch that again. And he got shut down again. And yet, it'll be like a completely unrelated video, and it's always, oh my gosh, can you believe Jeremiah did this, said that, breathed, oh my gosh, that was so presumptuous and cringe. But you know what's really funny? You know who, like, ate up, you don't have to hurt yourself to get my attention, besides me, Belly? And then we bring up this, and it's crickets. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to compile a list of all the times that Conrad referred to Belly as a child, a kid, good girl. And that's like one of the biggest things for me. I really hate these dynamics where the guy like refers to the girl as a child and yet pursues her. And then there's also some kind of weird like power dynamic with her like worshiping the guy and him like giving her the time of day when he feels like it. And that's the truth. Don't come here talking about anything that Jeremiah did unless you can explain why you find this attractive. If you find this attractive and you leave me alone, fine.
And then there's Barbie, which stinks so much. That movie stunk. And it's not because I didn't get it. It's not because I'm a man who's threatened. It's just like, I get it. I'm not threatened. I think it's actually kind of like, it wasn't like this feminist thing. It was just like, okay, yeah, it sucks to be a girl.
So there's been a lot of conversation about whether a certain movie that happens to cater to a largely female audience actually qualifies as good and valuable art or not. And I think it's time we talk about the myth of male exceptionalism and how it's created this kind of singular, homogenous idea of what good art looks like. Because it is absolutely true that there are valid criticisms of every single piece of art, and just because you like or dislike something doesn't necessarily say anything about you as a person. But it is also true that we live in a world that has for thousands of years celebrated the art of men and dismissed women's accomplishments en masse as frivolous and unimportant. That's not my suggestion or hypothesis, that is provable fact. Like, the biggest reason why we have pretty much any female authors in the classic literature category is because most of them published their books under either a male pseudonym or anonymously initially. And this is by design. This is because our society has intentionally culturally conditioned us to look with a different set of eyes at art and accomplishments of men more favorably than women. It's why we have statistics like 80% of the cooking around the world in every context is done by women, but 90% of like successful chefs are men. The reason why the vast majority of artistic masters or masters of any craft are men and have historically been men is not because men are better or more inherently profound than women. It's because when women make art, men say, well, it's just not as good. And the system they designed reinforces that ideology because there's historical precedent, because all of the great masters have been men, because all of the great perspectives that we have seen presented to us in art throughout history have been that of men. I just don't understand why we don't talk about it more, because it is literally undeniable that the centuries-long systemic marginalization and subjugation of women, of course, affects the way we view what's valuable in society. Do you really think it's a coincidence that the first female director to ever win an Oscar for Best Directing did so for a long, arduous war movie that had almost no women in it? There are exceptions, of course, but by and large, the vast majority of women who are able to find success in this world do so by carving out a place in a world designed for men. Historically, for the most part, if women have any aspirations of success outside of our like preordained roles of wife and mother, we have to find a way to adapt to the systems that men built for themselves, because they're definitely not going to make accommodations for us. So when I see men on a podcast completely dismissing and belittling the very well articulated thoughts of the women right next to them, trying to explain the value of this piece of art made by and for women, it's hard not to be frustrated. When I'm able to remove myself a little bit, I'm able to see the humor in it, right? Because these guys are literally using Joker as an example of what is profound and meaningful art because they resonate with it because of the darkness. Fail to see the value in the work of Greta Gerwig, a director who has one of the most scholarly approaches to filmmaking I have seen in a long time, and whose work is referential to some of the most celebrated art of all time that just doesn't happen to be dark, like Singing in the Rain and The Wizard of Oz. And this is why I speak my own opinions so unapologetically, especially when they go against popular thinking, because just because society tells you you're right doesn't mean you are. And no, bro, I don't think you got it. Adler here left this comment on my video about the myth of male exceptionalism. He says, there are hundreds of female authors, and they are given full credit, but books written and arts done by men are just more deep, profound, and better. Speaking of books written by women, I'd like to read you the first page of one of the best books I've ever read in my life from one of the greatest film critics of all time, Molly Haskell. This is her book, From Reverence to Rape, The Treatment of Women in the Movies. The first chapter of this book is called The Big Lie, and this is how it starts out. The big lie perpetrated on Western society is the idea of women's inferiority, a lie so deeply ingrained in our social behavior that merely to recognize it is to risk unraveling the entire fabric of civilization. Alfred Adler, what a coincidence, unique among his professional colleagues as well as among his sex in acknowledging that occasionally women had ambitions similar to men's, called attention to this mistake, the notion of women's inferiority and men's superiority, 50 years ago. At about the same time, Virginia Woolf wrote, "Women have served all these centuries as looking glasses, possessing the magic and delicious power of reflecting the figure of man at twice its natural size." How ironic that it was in the security of this enlarged image of himself, an image provided by wives, or more often mothers, that man went forth to fight, conquer, legislate, create. And women stayed home without so much as a room of her own, for only fulfillment, the hope of bearing a son to whom she could pass on the notion of male superiority. Now this guy, not worth anyone's time. He's either a troll or so far gone that what's even the point. But Molly Haskell, this woman, absolutely worth your time. This book is incredible. I cannot recommend it enough.
She's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can.
So I think it's really sad that mainstream media has kind of created this narrative that like any kind of romance is inherently anti-feminist. And all the love in the world to Rachel Ziegler, and frankly anyone who's played a Disney princess. I know those roles come with a ton of baggage, but I personally cannot wait for this super reductive kind of like girl boss feminism to just die out. I see it a lot in relation to these like live action Disney princess movies, because the conversation immediately becomes about like, oh, well, she's not going to be rescued by a man. She's not giving up her voice for a man. She's going to be a leader. And again, not only is that super reductive to the actual plots of these stories, but it's also very flattening from a character perspective. My biggest issue though is how frequently it's lobbied at like young female characters. Because I don't know about you, but when I was a young hormonal teenage girl, I was very frequently accused of being boy crazy. And those conversations always felt unbelievably condescending and belittling, which was a lot considering as a teenage girl, no one took anything I said seriously already. But the truth is, from a developmental standpoint, it is vitally important for young people to start establishing deep human connections outside of their family unit in adolescence. That's like a quintessential part about growing up and developing empathy and understanding how relationships work. It is a huge part of establishing independence for an adolescent. It is a major developmental step. When it comes to young women specifically, developing romantic feelings and connections is almost exclusively painted as a bad thing, which is in stark contrast to the way specifically film and TV and societally we approach the same thing with young boys. There are countless films and TV shows where it is a specific plot point that a young teenage boy is trying to lose his virginity. Not only is it not presented as shameful for boys, in fact, quite the opposite. They are often shamed for not having had sex yet, which is a problem in and of itself, but that's for a different video. But a lot of times, their romantic and sexual development is presented in the form of character growth and a very positive thing. Like, I understand that for a long time, most of the roles offered to women in mainstream media were reduced to underdeveloped love interest, and that sucks. But young girls are eventually going to develop romantic feelings. They're going to have sex someday. The first time they fall in love is going to feel like some of the biggest emotions they've ever felt in their life. And continuing to tell them that that is frivolous and unimportant and shameful, like, isn't helping anything. Yes, we should absolutely ensure that the female characters we're presenting on screen, especially to younger audiences, are not a one-dimensional love interest, not defined by the person that they love. But we also have to stop telling young girls that love is unimportant and they're silly if they feel like it is. Hey, so people are getting really fucking weird about this Rachel Ziegler situation. And by weird, I mean misogynistic and racist. And I don't really know why this conversation that started out really productive about all of the ways that like pop feminism is reductive and can actually be harmful in the abstract turned into Rachel Ziegler killed my dog and is the reason why the patriarchy exists. Because that's fucking weird. Weird and fucking ironic that so many people were willing to jump on here and start attacking every aspect of this woman's character, this 22-year-old actress's identity, because she's not fucking Bell Hooks, because she's not the pinnacle of modern feminist theory, because she had some clearly canned answers that were fed to both her and Gal Gadot to promote this movie that doesn't even have a trailer yet. For that, you want to tear this woman down, and you don't understand how misogynistic that is? Listen, I absolutely love academic discussion of fairy tales. I did a thesis on it in school, okay? I obviously love feminist representation in media. It's something that I am very passionate about and talk about constantly. I am so glad that the general conversation, the general idea of what feminist representation looks like is shifting and being challenged all the time. I think that's super important because we constantly learn so much and our perspectives are constantly changing on these issues. Like, as our shared social understanding of these very complex and constantly evolving issues expands, we have to leave room. It's not going to change overnight. You know what? At the end of the day, actors are selling a fucking product. Don't tell me that you go into Disney live action remakes expecting to get complex feminist theory. Please, for the love of God, if you genuinely believe that, just log off the internet. These are paid actors whose jobs start when they actually have to play the role and don't end until they have done an entire press tour selling this movie the way that the studios want it sold to the audience, okay? It's absolutely horrifying to me that people will pat themselves on the back for joining this righteous mob to tear this woman down because, oh, they're so smart, they spotted some outdated feminism. And then, with the same breath, get on here and enthusiastically support some fucking weird, pandering, bullshit AI Snow White trailer? Why? Just how? In summation, Rachel Ziegler is just another 22-year-old woman who has cameras in her face all the time and didn't give a perfect answer one time. That's literally the end of the story. And this entire shitstorm that has led to people finding new and creative ways to make racist Snow White puns and be violently misogynistic is just another example of a woman being held to impossibly high standards for something that should not possibly be her responsibility. Like, I just don't know how it's not clear to you people yet that the second you bring in a body language expert to determine a woman's moral standing based on her just shifting micro expressions, you've already lost the misogyny allegations. Like, that's just it. So, sex scene discourse is happening again. And the crux of this conversation when it happens is that there are a lot of seemingly young people on the internet who view, like, sex scenes in general as exploitative first, as unnecessary, gratuitous, and a lot of times even predatory. Now, I think just like with most discourse that ends up happening on the internet, this conversation started from a place that was like really well-intentioned, and I think there are like good points being made. I just think that like most discourse on the internet, it's overall lacking nuance, and I do have some issues with it. I also think that just observationally, it says a lot of kind of sad things about where we're moving as a society, and particularly like young people's ability to connect with one another. I think it's also important to remember that a lot of these like takes we see on the internet that start huge discourse are genuinely like teenagers who still live with their parents, and that's going to color their entire worldview. Like, I think it's very, very different watching a film that has intimacy scenes when your parents are literally sitting right next to you and you're a teenager in high school versus any other context, you know? So I think that a lot of times discourse gets blown out of proportion all on its own because we're taking at face value things that have a lot more context behind them. That said, I think there is space in the conversation to acknowledge that there can be projects that feel very gratuitous and exploitative in like the nudity and the kind of sex scenes that they choose to show. I don't even want to say intimacy because a lot of times these conversations center around assault and the treatment and abuse of women in media, which I think is absolutely valid to be upset about and talk about. Where people generally lose me is when the conversation shifts to sex scenes as a whole are bad and never beneficial to the story, because I think that that is a really reductive way to look at how we depict human relationships. Sex is a very important and natural part of life, and it's integral to the way our relationships, our specifically romantic relationships, form. Whether or not you're telling like a very intimate love story, or if you're just depicting people having sex with each other in a more casual setting, like that kind of storytelling tells you a lot about the characters, not just like actual story points, but emotionally. Like I think it's a very valid and important way to express character growth and development. I just think it's interesting because in a world that's becoming increasingly more isolated, like physically, but we also more publicly perform our identities in this kind of like digital format. And a big part of that is illustrating our morality. I don't know. It's a little bit concerning to see so much of it, like the shame around sex coming into play in this kind of capacity. There have just been a lot of instances where it starts to feel like puritanical and like pushing this idea that sex is inherently shameful, which I think is kind of unfortunate. And all this to say, like, of course, not all art needs to be for everybody. It's okay if it's not your thing. But I just think the way that the general conversations are going speak to like larger trends in our society that are a little concerning. Okay, yes, I'm just as devastated and furious about this as everyone else, but I have a conspiracy theory and I don't think it's that crazy, although I'm not sure my judgment is super trustworthy because I think my brain is like kind of melting from having to keep all of my thoughts about movies and TV mostly to myself these days. Here's the thing. Honestly, I'm not convinced that this has as much to do with the strikes as people are giving it credit for. I think this could be just generic, good old-fashioned corporate greed. Because as we all know, ever since Discovery acquired Warner Brothers, they have been making catastrophically stupid decision after catastrophically stupid decision. So much so, it seems almost intentional. Like, Discovery came in and started treating Warner Brothers like it was fucking Radio Shack. There is absolutely no reasonable explanation for getting rid of shows like Insecure and Westworld and selling them to other platforms. Canning Batgirl for tax purposes, which I will never not be mad about, and I absolutely do not believe that the reasoning behind it was because of poor audience scores, because the DC films that they released after that, there's no way audiences were super jazzed about those. Not only would Leslie Grace have been their first Latina lead, something they pushed really hard with Blue Beetle, but Michael Keaton had also already come back as the Batman, something they pushed really hard for The Flash, and also Brendan Fraser, fresh off of his fucking Oscar win, was playing the lead villain. Like, this film had so much going for it. Then there's this story that broke earlier this year, how Discovery was trying to sell off about $500 million worth of Warner Brothers film and TV music assets, including As Time Goes By from Casablanca, the Batman themes, the music from Purple Rain. Like, the way Discovery is treating Warner Brothers like it's a fire sale and everything must go, they are acting fucking broke. And as we all know, they even rebranded their most valuable asset to remove the name of one of the most respected and successful brands in media right now, HBO, and they changed their streaming service to Just Max. Like, this is all fitting into this narrative that Discovery took over from HBO and they have to clean house because they don't have any money, because the company desperately needs help. And then what happens? Fucking Barbie makes $1 billion. I genuinely think that WB knows that, like, Aquaman 2 and the rest of the DC slate that's like left over before James Gunn's new DCU like officially starts, they're not really guaranteed box office hits. They have not done well over the past couple of years. And I don't think they're counting on making a lot of money from that. They know Dune 2 is going to make money no matter what. Starring Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, like, maybe not as much money as if it had a press tour, but they're also losing a ton of money by delaying all these projects. Like, this is all just conjecture from someone who just observes these things, but it seems to me like WB really wants to say, oh, we're broke, we don't have money. But if they make $1 billion from Barbie and then $500 million from Dune 2 in the same year, how are they going to publicly rationalize continuing to slash and burn every single asset that WB has? They're not going to be able to. Because we already know that the WGA and SAG strikes are costing studios hundreds of millions of dollars. Honestly, it's probably more than it would cost them just to pay them their demands, because what the WGA and SAG is asking for accounts for a tiny fraction of their annual profit. If it was just a matter of like what makes the most financial sense on paper, like the strikes wouldn't have started in the first place. It's about power and control, and the very, very few people at the top who have the most money and power controlling the narrative. And that's why I feel like, I don't know, there could be more to this, because shit has been weird with WB for a while now, and they keep making just baffling decisions that I feel like, putting on my tinfoil cap, like, it's gotta be more calculated than it is, unless they really are this stupid. I mean, that's also genuinely a possibility. I feel like the film industry is in for a major reckoning, and the strikes are honestly just the beginning, because the AMPT really wants people to believe that they are in control and they have all the power by doing things like refusing to meet with SAG and WGA leadership in order to even have negotiations, because the whole reason why they're dragging this shit out is just to punish people because they have all the money and they think that means they have all the power, but it doesn't. The Taylor Swift Eras Tour movie is the perfect example, because the studios were being fucking greedy. They were trying to undercut Taylor and her team, and Taylor Swift has enough money to produce this film on her own, and that's exactly what she did. They paid $10 to $20 million, and they approached theaters directly and said, hey, let's make a distribution deal ourselves. And not only is this great for Miss Taylor Swift, but it's also fantastic for theaters who have been getting increasingly screwed over by studios over the past few years and their greed. This situation right now with the strikes puts theaters in a very similar position to a lot of other entertainment professionals who are like adjacent to the strikes, where we're all in this position now where we don't know what the future of our industry looks like. They don't know what audiences are going to be expecting or wanting. And especially after the success of Barbenheimer this summer, it has to be really frustrating to see that huge demand for the theater experience and have the AMPT say, oh, right as people want this, we're cutting you off. Plus, you have to know that other musicians are looking at this now and thinking, holy shit, like I'm going to do this too. And there's been kind of a debate going on in the entertainment industry about like the efficacy, for example, of the SAG-AFTRA agreements, because there are some people who think that if the end goal is to deprive the AMPTP of any and all content, and even these productions that make these agreements will probably be looking to the AMPTP for either distribution or to appear on streaming at some point. And I guess the idea is to dry up the well of entertainment. Then like, how effective are they? But with the amount of companies that are agreeing to these terms now, the terms that SAG wants, they are agreeing to everything that SAG wants. They're saying they will honor whatever agreement is matched, up to honoring every single demand that SAG has. And these are not only independent companies like A24 and Neon, but like AMC just struck a deal in order to promote Interview with the Vampire Season 2 and some of their other projects. That is the first, it's technically a streaming service, but it's also a major network that is agreeing to these things. But that's not all. There are more factors at play, because a judge recently decided that anything created with AI is not eligible for a copyright claim. So these studios that are alleging that they want the right to work with AI are, in theory, not even going to be able to copyright anything they create with that. And the writers and actors are not on their side. And in recent weeks, Marvel VFX workers and Disney VFX workers have both voted to unionize. The longer this goes on, the more discontentment is sowed, the more people realize how incredibly unfair this system has always been. If I was the AMPTP, I'd be hauling fucking ass to make a deal right now. But they can't, because these people that make up the AMPTP are natural enemies. They are huge competitors that don't get along with each other. And then you have people like Zaslav, who seems to have made it his entire personal mission to tear apart everything historical and great about a company like Warner Brothers. These people don't respect art, and they don't respect each other. Meanwhile, more and more smaller companies are saying, you know what, fuck these guys, we will agree to what you guys want, to SAG and the WGA. And the longer this goes on, it's very hard. It's not an easy time for anyone in the entertainment industry, but it gives me a lot of hope, because it feels like people are so upset that this could lead to radical change, which would be very exciting. Film is, without question, the most important art form of this era of human existence. You might not care about film and TV, but from a historical and from an anthropological perspective, film and TV is one of the greatest tools we have for understanding the way humans exist in the world at a specific time. It is an art form that is so all-encompassing and authentic and mesmerizing, even at its most capitalistic and ridiculous, that it not only reflects the reality, the social norms of the time, but it actively changes social perception. And you can complain all you want about how capitalism and corporate ideology has infiltrated the artistic integrity of the film world, but you could say the same thing about the fucking Renaissance, because the people that were funding Michelangelo and Raphael and Da Vinci were the elite, and they were pushing a very serious agenda. Why do you think all of the great art from the Renaissance is about the fucking Christian church? And just to be clear, I'm not saying that as an excuse. I think that those kinds of conversations are important. I think that maintaining the integrity of this incredibly visceral art form that is almost universally relatable, transcends language and culture a lot of the time, is very, very important. And it is actually a tragedy that these soul-sucking billionaires would tear all of that down to make a quick buck. I don't give a fuck if you personally care deeply about film or TV. That doesn't make them unimportant, because one of the most prolific and meaningful forms of human expression deserves fucking better. The people that made the art that has resonated with billions of people over the past century deserve fucking better. Sam Levinson just cannot stop making an enemy out of me. I have the most infuriating news. So, in news that will probably shock no one, it turns out that the recently canceled disaster of a show, The Idol, that we all know was originally being developed by Amy Simons until she was unceremoniously dumped so that Sam Levinson could come in and give the show less of a female perspective, was not the first time that he did something like that. Because apparently, acclaimed artist Petra Collins, who's recently gotten a lot of praise for her work with Olivia Rodrigo directing her music videos, was originally developing Euphoria until she was told that she didn't have enough experience to lead the project, and Sam Levinson was brought in. Like, this is absolutely shocking to me because, as far as I can tell, Petra Collins is not credited anywhere in Euphoria, but she says that she was brought out to Los Angeles and spent 5 months working on the project, and that they led her on to believe that she was going to be the director of the series. Which really seems to highlight like a pretty disturbing pattern for Sam Levinson. Now, we don't have a ton of information here, and Sam Levinson has talked a lot about how personal developing Euphoria is, like in writing about his own issues with addiction. But it has been brought up a lot that Euphoria is very female-centric, specifically like speaking to the trauma and experiences of young women. And even though Rue is an addict, like there are a lot of other very important elements of the story that should be handled delicately and should be written from a place of experience when it comes to young women. Season 2 in particular, there was a lot of complaints about the exploitative nature of the way these young girls were being depicted. And like, I'm not loving the vibes. Petra Collins is wildly talented and has such a specific aesthetic that you can definitely see, at the very least, as an inspiration for Euphoria. So, I mean, I'm very excited to see where her career goes, but this is frustrating.
So I've been asked a lot to talk about all the wedding references in The Summer I Turned Pretty, and if I think that that relates to the plot of book 3 or is like foreshadowing for book 3, or if I rather think that it points to like a jelly endgame. And I actually have been saying I do not think we're getting that absurd rushed wedding plot in season 3. I don't think they're sticking to it at all. I do not think they're sticking to the plot of We'll Always Have Summer in season 3. There may be more than 3 seasons, and we might see some kind of wedding or wedding adjacent thing take place in a later season. I would be shocked if this played out in season 3. And I'll explain why, but first of all, my general thoughts are, I do understand why people think that all this wedding stuff and the Deb Ball might be like foreshadowing for what happens in book 3 and maybe what we'll see in a future season, but I don't think it's that at all. I actually think it's more like a nod or an homage to what happened in the books. We see that a lot actually with little symbols and moments from the books that are kind of nodded to but don't play out exactly the same way. And if you think about it, season 1, love triangle wise, is kind of like all 3 books smushed together, and I think this is more so with the Deb Ball references. So we do see Belly and Jeremiah under arches more than once. Of course, this looks like their wedding. My future wife, which we love, he looks at the painting and it's her in like the wedding looking dress and his next to it. We get that really heart-wrenching moment before the Deb Ball where Jeremiah and Susanna are dancing, giving the mother-son dance. She says in the beginning, I want to see our girl in a white dress. This is very much supposed to look like their wedding, but then if you think about it, Clown Rad, as usual, swoops in at the very last minute after absolutely no effort from his part because he's just the effortless Prince Charming who's always there conveniently at the right time. Jeremiah's crying outside on a bench alone. Nobody says boo. Interestingly, Conrad also found him on a bench similarly when he went to look for him the morning of his wedding to Belly. That's the Way I Love You plays, and it's this really corny moment, which, by the way, That's the Way I Loved You is not romantic in the way that you think it is. Like, yeah, it's a fun bop, but the guy in that song is not a good love interest. You know that, right? And if you think about it, love triangle wise, season 1 is kind of the way that the love triangle goes in the books. Like, Belly and Jeremiah have like the actual relationship. Conrad is this like idealized fantasy. He swoops in at the last minute. Jeremiah gets tossed to the side as usual, and then they have this very cringe, rushed romance moment, very reminiscent of their one-page endgame in the book. The other thing I thought was interesting is that when Conrad and Jeremiah have their fight at the Deb Ball, Jeremiah throws the first punch, which is totally a huge change from the book, and of course it's for a different reason, but the only time Jeremiah throws the first punch in the books is before his wedding to Belly. In the book 1 fight at the end is totally different. It happens because Conrad and Belly are fighting. He grabs and shakes her, and Jeremiah sees it and intervenes. Mind you, both boys know the whole summer in the books, and Jeremiah simply doesn't act like that. Also, interestingly, a lot of Jeremiah's dialogue in this fight that they have in season 2, where he's like, "You're a coward and I don't want to know you," that is extremely reminiscent, almost word for word, the dialogue from the fight that they have before their wedding, which doesn't happen, of course, and that's the only fight where Jeremiah punches Conrad first. So again, that says to me that this probably isn't happening. These are just like nods to it and things taken from it. So overall, my point is, I do not think we're seeing the plot of book 3 play out on screen. I've talked about why I think it would be distasteful for a lot of reasons, and I think a lot of times people take like Easter eggs as in they have to mean foreshadowing, when I think a lot of times they're just kind of like, hey, look at this. That being said, while I've never had much confidence in a Jelly endgame as much as I would love it, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have any confidence in it or that nothing means anything. My future wife will always mean something to me. These visuals will always mean something to me, and while I think there is a lot of cute symbolism in Jelly, the beauty of Jelly is that we've never had to reach into the sky and rely on like Sour Patch Kids and the stars point their way in like artificial motel light to make our ship good. It's like about the actual relationship. Jelly will always be the superior ship regardless of endgame. Like, we know that in our hearts, and I think the songs that are used and the things that we see, regardless of if they're pointing to endgame or not, tell us exactly what we need to know and how we feel about them. No one can see me like you do. No one can see you like I do. Your love is bright as ever, even in the shadows. Final answer, I don't think we're seeing that ridiculous wedding plot play out in season 3. If we see it at all, it was dated and out of character for them in the books. It would be even more absurd now. I would, of course, love to see like an actual Jelly wedding, like in the future, one that doesn't get ruined by Conroach and the Bon Roach cheerleaders. And in my heart, that's what happened. And they named their baby Daisy, so it doesn't matter anyway. Forgive me for what I'm about to say, but one of my most favorite delusional Bonrad grasping at straws takes is Jeremiah is so aggressive with Belly, and Conrad isn't like that, so it shows that he really loves her. So not only is it tell me you're into tell, don't show relationships without telling me, tell me you're into emotionally unavailable, rude, backhanded men without telling me, but also tell me you've never had a good kiss without telling me. First of all, there's a reason that all the Jelly kisses continuously go viral and have people screaming. Second of all, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being consensually, physically affectionate and desirous. It's also extremely weird to imply that bland kissing and intimacy implies that somebody loves you more. For like a lot of reasons, that's really weird. Third of all, they're just being book accurate. Jelly has always been very affectionate, very passionate. He kissed like he was drowning and I was air. It was passionate and desperate and like nothing I had ever experienced before. This was what people meant when they said the earth stopped turning. It felt like a world outside of that car. That moment didn't exist. It was just us. Fourth, Belly is right up there with him and eats it up every time, swooning. It was really hot. Fifth, we have the benefit of all kinds of kisses, each one iconic. We have passionate, romantic, forward, tender, sweet, and playful. We have it all, each one iconic. And beyond that, I have to say I really do love that people are still running with the choking allegations against Jer Bear, because it really is just a nice touch to add to the attempted unaliver, master manipulator, narcissist accusations against him. Like, he really is that iconic. He threatens you all that much. And speaking of the choking allegations, if you were in my live, you might have heard me go on about how Jelly is a neck heavy couple, and I do have a point. So we always talk about the neck grab and like she touches his neck, but when I saw that and like when everybody started talking about that, I thought it was really interesting because I noticed in the books that Jelly is all about each other's necks, that they're always like blowing on each other's necks or tickling each other's necks or like kissing each other's neck. Like, again, with the neck, like they're just into each other's necks. And she says, thinking about losing Jer, I would never cup the back of Jer's neck in my hand again. Feel its downy softness like feathers. Like, this is one of her favorite things. They are so neck heavy. And my point with this, my friend and I were talking about this, if she's watching, she knows who she is that the neck is like a really vulnerable vulnerable spot, and you'd have to be really comfortable with somebody to let them touch your neck like that and like want to touch their neck. And they're all about the neck, okay? It's all about being comfortable and vulnerable, and that's what they are, okay? I did have a point, I believe it, and it's just so funny and ridiculous because yes, they have great chemistry, but they're such a sweet, tender couple and friendship. Like, they are best friends. They sleep next to each other for comfort in the books. They cry in each other's arms. Hand holding is a big deal for them. They have inside jokes. Like, are you kidding? First it was their platonic besties, now it's just lust. Like, just admit they have it all and go. It's so embarrassing. It's almost as if they have a deep, sweet, and tender emotional friendship, and they're also in love and have amazing romantic chemistry. Like, it's almost as if they have it all. So one of my favorite jelly parallels from the books is about video games, and hear me out. Now, you know how I said that I think a lot of the things we see in the show are like nods to the books, and some of it might be foreshadowing, but a lot of times it's like, hey, do you remember this? So you may have heard me talk about this before. It's the last flashback that Belly shares about Jeremiah in book 3, and it always lowers me into my grave for many reasons. It's her talking about how she and Jeremiah used to collect sand crabs on the beach and play on the beach together, and she had talked about this before in previous books, and this particular time she says that they had been collecting sand crabs and he doesn't leave when Conrad and Stephen come looking for him, and then later they tell him that they're going to go rent a new video game, and if he doesn't come with them, he can't play their game, and Jeremiah says he doesn't care and stays with Belly. And then later that night when Conrad and Stephen are playing their video game, Jeremiah watches them, and he doesn't ask them if he can play, even though Belly can see how much he wanted to. And that's what she says, in my memory he would always be golden, and it always just destroys me. And like I've said many times, Jeremiah is the one with the golden motifs, not Conrad. He's daylight. Anyway, first of all, there's this moment in the show where the boys are playing video games and Jeremiah gets up and they're like, okay, just abandon the game completely, Jer. And he ignores them to twirl Belly and tell her how good she looks, and we love this scene. And then again, in the last episode of season 2, Steven's like, do you want to get out of here and play some video games, Jer? Which, by the way, fake friend Steven, go right off into the sunset with Cornflake and your Ivy League schools. But anyway, point is, he's like, thanks, but I'm gonna stay and see Belle's play. Like, obviously he's supporting his wife, Steven. He doesn't want to play video games with you. Bye. Anyway, the point is, it's cute. Alexa, play video games by Lana. Okay, so I'm gonna be real. The whole just wait until Jeremiah finds out about Belly and Cornstarch having intimate relations and the fireplace scene is weird on a lot of fronts for a lot of reasons, and I will explain why. So first of all, to those of you who asked, Belly does not have actual relations with either of them in the books. Jenny's books tended to shy away from actual relation. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but the show is just more segs positive, forward, more TV modern, if you will. And honestly, having some kind of plotline centered around Belly's virginity would be weird. If they did that, I think it would be really odd and off tone for the show, and also just in poor taste. And might I add, Jeremiah is not stupid. He knows that people in relationships often have segs. I don't really see it being a thing. The only thing that I could maybe see is if Belly directly lies to him about it and then he finds out. I could maybe see that, but I do not see them making a thing out of the act itself. I do not see him caring deeply about the act itself. And I will add that as much as you like to say that it is not in character for Jer to throw a fit about that. And I love how you all wanted Jeremiah to be the slut shamer so bad. And who ended up doing the slut shaming? Condiment. Who was slut shamed? Jeremiah, which brings me to another point. The only person who has been slut shamed in this show is Jeremiah, more than once, which would make it in even more poor taste to involve him or implicate him in some kind of cheating plot. Not that Jeremiah cheated on Belly in the book, he didn't. They were explicitly broken up, but to add that would really lean into this promiscuous bi-cheater stereotype and paint and welcome a lot of biphobia that is already happening, especially with all the cheating and cheating adjacent things that have already happened thus far in the show, and Jeremiah being the only one who doesn't have some kind of questionable cheatish thing in his history. And I'm mentioning this because I also see a lot of people saying like, oh, he's gonna find out about the fireplace scene and then go cheat. That would be really vile of them to do for a lot of reasons. It would be misogynistic and biphobic and just ick. Again, the only thing I see possibly happening wondering is if he's hurt that she like directly lied about it. And to those of you saying like there's just no way that they're gonna have her sleep with both brothers, to that I say, number one, you guys I guess just don't watch that much TV, because that happens all the time on television, and you certainly did not watch TV back in my day. Like the shows that were on when I was like in middle school and high school, like we all know that was like old hat, like getting with siblings, like nobody even batted an eye. It was like run of the mill, to be honest. There's so many examples, but like big one that most people are probably familiar with, Elena slept with both brothers and it worked out fine. Like it's only weird if they make it weird, and I could just see them not making it weird. And I have to say, I don't understand people being flabbergasted when she gets with both brothers, because don't get me wrong, like I have my criticisms of Miss Belly Button, I do, but it was in the user agreement when you turned on this Wattpad story or picked up the book about a love triangle between two brothers that's literally just copy paste Twilight. Like I say that with love, like you signed up for this. If you're that disturbed by the content, why do you put it on? Respectfully, that's the premise of the show. And to everybody saying, oh, they're not going to have her get with both brothers like intimately because she didn't have actual relations with Jeremiah in the books. She didn't have intimate relations with Cornflake in the books either. The show has taken a different direction. The books shied away from Segs. The show is not. So honestly, I could see them just not making it a thing and going on business as usual. And in the book, like she and Jeremiah, they were passionate and physically affectionate. Like she was waiting for the right time to take that step, and she was feeling more and more ready. Like she wanted to, they were going to. It really is just kind of the books as a whole shied away from it. The show is just different. And the other thing that I've seen is people talking about like how it relates to the book. Like one of the reasons that Belly is so hurt by Jeremiah sleeping with Lacey Barone when they were broken up is because she hadn't experienced that with him yet. And like I said, I really don't necessarily see the Lacey thing happening at all in season 3. I certainly do not see the wedding thing happening in season 3. Obviously the dynamics would be different for that, but again, I really don't necessarily think they're taking that direction. Now, I've also seen people say that they think maybe they're flipping that and Jeremiah hasn't taken that step, and hooking up just means like making out and kissing, and that like contributes to why he's like hurt by it. But to be honest, like maybe, but I kind of don't see them making a plot line out of virginity, if I'm being like completely honest. Again, obviously I don't know, these are just my educated guesses, but it doesn't really fit the tone or dynamics of the show thus far, in my opinion. I also think like including the Lacey plot really doesn't fit. It would be very ick with the decision to make him bi. It would be very ick with all the favors they've done for Connie Baby so far. A lot at Jeremiah's expense. But either way, we are almost certainly not seeing Jeremiah throw a fit just because Corny took her to the summer house and took her to Pound Town. And then especially like he cheats because of it. I really, really doubt that. It would be misogynistic, biphobic, and odd. Again, the only thing I could maybe see is if she like directly lies to him about it. But even then, I don't necessarily see them making a thing out of it. I kind of doubt it actually, but that's just my thought. So Susanna has been getting her criticism for her role in the love triangle and the whole destined for one of my boys things, and that's a separate topic. Susanna's her own topic that we can talk about. But two things. Number one, at the end of the day, it wasn't really one of my boys, was it? It was Flap Rat. And number two, why does everybody say, oh, well, I don't understand why Laurel didn't put a stop to that when Laurel was right there with her? Laurel is the reigning queen of Team Cobweb, and she 100% carried that torch on after Susanna died. And I'm gonna say it, she is largely responsible for Bonrad getting together in that one-page endgame, particularly in the book. So Belly says in book 1, first of all, Susanna told me that when I was born, she knew I was destined for one of her boys. She said it was fate. My mother, who normally didn't go in for that kind of thing, said it would be perfect as long as I'd had at least a few loves before I settled down. Actually, she said lovers, but that word made me cringe. Susanna put her hands on my cheeks and said, Belly, you have my unequivocal blessing. I'd hate to lose my boys to anyone else. Boy, boy mom, okay? Laurel clearly was for it, and I always thought Laurel was a little bit off for this comment too, because it's like, yeah, you're destined for one of the boys, but I just want you to have lots of lovers before that. And like, I know that in sentiment, it's like you want your daughter to experience things, but this is kind of like a weird comment too, because that's kind of like putting her in a box in a different way, because not everybody's going to want to or going to date lots and lots of people, and that's not really making it better. Like, okay, you can end up with one of the boys, but you got to date a lot of people first. I just didn't like, not that I'm saying you should encourage getting married at 18 or whatever it is, but this is not the sensible advice that everybody seems to have this idea that Laurel gave her. Now, you can see in the show that Laurel favors Cornflake and has like a special relationship with him, but this is even more pronounced in the books. He's definitely her favorite. It's like this sentimentality of being the oldest child and them relating to each other because they're both like emotionally withholding and uptight, and also just that family's weird hero worship of Condiment. For one, she makes a lot of excuses for condensation, very much in the same way that Susanna does, prioritizes him and like, oh, it's hard for him, he has a lot of pride, does not acknowledge Jeremiah in the same way, does not take him seriously. Laurel thought the Bonrad situationship that they had in the books, because they didn't even have a relationship in the books, was all like cutesy and fun and was like smirking at it. Like, she thought it was very cute. And you could see like in the show, they showed that too, that Laurel was like very cutesy and happy about their relationship and going to prom. And she said that stupid quote about like Conrad is the son for Belly, which is not in the books and doesn't make any sense. But it was all Bonrad, all the Bonrad girlies saying the moms are definitely team Bonrad. Like, yes, but that's not a good thing. And you can see as you get into book 3, Laurel is much less approving of Belly's relationship with Jeremiah, and she actually has a relationship with Jeremiah, and you very much get the impression that she had to convince her mom why she was going to the same school as him, and she would like give them looks about like going out to dinner and like, don't be one of those girls in college with a boyfriend, don't spend all your time, which you could kind of write off and accept as like, okay, that's just how Laurel is. She's like a strict, like practical parent. If she wasn't so happy-go-lucky and romantic starry-eyed about Belly and Dufrad when he treated her poorly and Jeremiah had been nothing but good to her. And mind you, this is before the whole stupid engagement plot. Obviously, I hate book 3, and I think that whole rushed engagement plot is very dumb, very out of character, did not fit for either of them, deserved better, stupid, but it wasn't anything manipulative or sinister. It was just dumb. And obviously, Laurel is very, very nasty about this wedding. Not even just like, you shouldn't do this, like you're making a huge mistake, I'm not coming, you take things too lightly, Jeremiah, how could he do this is so stupid, blah blah blah, like so straight up nasty. And I obviously do not think that they should have been getting married then, but like Laurel very much takes the stance of this is the worst thing you could possibly ever do. Mind you, this whole time she's having this like special close relationship with Conrad where they like talk and meet up, which is fine, but mind you, she's not like that with Jeremiah at all. She greatly favors Conrad, as everybody in the family does, everybody, which is another thing we have to talk about because everybody acts like it was just their father. It wasn't, it was everybody. But regardless, she's literally bringing up Conrad to Belly, saying like, Conrad's definitely coming tonight, right, Bean? And Belly's like, you're the one that talks to him, not me. But possibly the worst part of this is that after all this happens and Conundrum confesses to Belly like a day before they're supposed to get married, after never admitting he has feelings for her, and then obviously the wedding doesn't happen because Jeremiah calls it off. After all that happens, Laurel is literally sponsoring and funding these horrific borderline harassment letters from him. Belly goes to study abroad in Spain. She is not speaking to Cornstarch. The last time they spoke, she explicitly chose Jeremiah over him, was like, no, bye. He tried to give her that rusty, raggedy infinity necklace. Laurel is over here letting this man touch her stuff, go in her bedroom, giving him her address and information about her life and her dating life. Mind you, Belly is not responding to these letters. And here's Laurel like, oh, Connie, guess what? Belly's doing this. Here's her address. Oh my gosh, she's dating someone. So what? He could write weird, vaguely racist letters to her about it that she's not responding to? Laurel was 150% for it. She was 100% Team Bonrad. That was her little favorite, her baby boy, and she was all there for it. And you want to know what's really sad? Maybe the saddest thing, one of the saddest things, is that Jeremiah had to be at that wedding. right? That Bonrad wedding with the one-page endgame, that pathetic one-page endgame, he had to be there, and he had to see Laurel and everybody be so happy, and oh my gosh, they were meant to be, and isn't it a beautiful wedding? Mind you, Belly was only 23 when, like, they were filled with such disdain about him and Belly getting married, and then he has to watch. Oh, it's so sick and twisted that family's hero worship of Corncob is so weird and damaging. I'm not gonna say that I don't think Laurel cares about Jeremiah, but it's obvious where her bias and her favoritism lies, and that family's Bonrad agenda that Bonrads think is like so cute and like romantic, it's really not. They neglected and devalued a whole kid, and also terrible ship. Terrible shit. You know what I think is funny? And I mean really funny. When we're talking about something that Floprad did, like him grabbing and shaking Belly and her saying it felt like he might either hit me or kiss me, or the nasty, cruel things that he says and does, and the way he makes Belly feel, and his straight up actions that are poor and mistreatment, and the fact that he and Belly were never friends and never spent time alone together, or Belly's talking about something good and positive that she loves about Jeremiah, or something that he did, or how he makes her feel. Belly is an unreliable narrator, and we can't trust her. And I've literally seen people like defend things like this with, well, she was narrating unreliably. But then when it gets to book 3 and Jeremiah and Belly explicitly break up, the dialogue is let's end it. Belly storms out and says fine. They are explicitly broken up, and he has a one-night stand with rando Lacey Barone. And Belly thinks it's cheating because she's hurt by it, and she calls it cheating even if she says things like Jeremiah cheated on me when we were broken up. All of a sudden, Miss Unreliable is God Almighty. And I'm not even trying to get into that right now, and how nobody even considers Jeremiah's perspective in book 3 at all. And my pin video breaks down the breakup and all the receipts and everything. But like, she literally says, I couldn't believe that we had broken up. But then it is cheating because Belly says that it was cheating. Belly's not God Almighty. You were just telling me that she was unreliable. And that's the thing. Belly is only unreliable in the sense that her narrative is only her narrative, only her perspective, and filtered through her feelings. She does not have all the knowledge. She does not know everyone's intentions. She does not misconstrue events. If Conrad treated her poorly and he has actions and behavior that is objectively bad, it was that, regardless of if Belly knew his intentions or not. Likewise, if Belly and Jeremiah are explicitly broken up, regardless of if she thought or she had hoped that they might get back together, they were still broken up. And while it's totally understandable and valid that she would feel hurt by what happened and that might affect how she views things and how she says things, they were still broken up, regardless of if she thought that they might get back together or he hoped that they might get back together. They were explicitly broken up, not a break, nothing. And the fact that Belly really thought that he should chase after her after that argument just sends me every time, like after destroying his self-esteem like that. But I'm not even trying to get into that right now. The point is, you guys literally just make it up as you go along. You cannot claim, oh, she was unreliable, but then this, oh, well, Belly said that the breakup wasn't real and he should have really known. Okay, goodbye. I have just been met with confirmation of some very distressing news that my brain blocked out or something. Belly was so traumatized by Floprad and the prom debacle that she canonically did not attend her senior prom in the books. I read this book twice in the past couple months, and I remember this line, but I guess I just didn't process it correctly, or the timeline, because my brain was trying to protect itself. But she says when she's dress shopping with Taylor, I only went to one prom, I reminded her. One had been more than enough for me. And this is so devastating for many reasons. Number one, because Belly and Jeremiah were dating at the time of her senior prom, and not only that, but they had both wished that they went to prom together and daydreamed about going to prom together. He wouldn't have forgotten the corsage. He would have given her the perfect night. He would have been so happy to take her. And Belly says if it had been Jeremiah, it would have been different. He would have said all the right things. He would have been in the center of the dance floor. He would have remembered that her favorite flower were daisies. Everybody would have been been jealous. And now just to know that, like, she couldn't even go because she was so, like, I'm sick with this knowledge. Robbed like a bank. I just can't believe how many major events in Belly's life Dirt Rad got away with ruining, and I'm still supposed to think that he's an ideal or even decent love interest. Like, are you kidding? So obviously I'm hoping that this is rectified in the show, either by actually seeing them go to prom, because we do deserve that. I think they probably wouldn't do a whole prom scene, but like, even if we just saw like a cutesy little picture or like a moment in a montage, and the only book canon that I'm accepting is that Belly expressed that she didn't want to go to prom, and at first Jeremiah was like, what, why? But then he like understood, and then they did something like cute together anyway, and it was very like cute and sweet and magical and intimate and sensitive, and they had a lot of fun and like snuggled, and it could be like very cute instead of going to prom. But like, are you kidding me? Very few things annoy me as much as book 3 Belly getting annoyed at Jeremiah for having allergies, except maybe people acting like this was some kind of bad look for Jeremiah when it was most definitely a bad look for Belly. And as somebody who wasn't even a Belly hater before this might have been the moment in book 3 where I was like, you know what? I think my patience for Miss Belly Button has run dry now, because no way. And mind you, Belly gushes about what a wonderful, caring boyfriend Jeremiah is, and among this, she tells us multiple times that he takes good care of her when she's not feeling well. He buys her Midol when she has cramps. He holds her hair back and rubs her back when she gets sick. He carries her across campus on his back when her feet hurt. He makes sure she has food when she's stressed out. He paints her toenails, right? And yet she is annoyed by his seasonal allergies. And this annoyed me in sentiment because allergies are not a joke, believe me. And she's annoyed, number one, because he wants to eat Indian food and she doesn't really like Indian food because it gives her an upset stomach. By the way, we don't ever see her communicate this, that she doesn't like Indian food. And also, nobody said that she had to eat the Indian food. And she's like, he could be really oblivious sometimes, and I had to wonder if it was on purpose. Like, girl, what? First of all, oblivious on purpose is not really a thing. Second of all, what are you talking about? You could just say, I don't like Indian food. You could just not eat it. I'm sure that you could get something else. I'm sure he would have gotten you something else if you just said that. But also, like, he can just eat the food that he likes when he's not feeling well. Like, are you being serious right now? And she's annoyed because he wants her to hang out with him and bring tissues and orange juice. Very elaborate request. We know very well that he would do this for her. She says, he called me sneezing like crazy, all stuffed up and pitiful. Can you come over and hang out with me? He asked, blowing his nose. And can you bring more Kleenex and orange juice? I'm sorry, that's really cute. And she says, I bit my lip to keep from saying you have allergies, not swine flu. Belly, come on. He probably can't breathe. This is not that serious. He just wants to hang out with you. If she really couldn't bear to do this for him, she could have just said that, but she lies about it and says, I really want to come over, but I have a paper that's due tomorrow. I said, trying to sound conflicted about it, so I probably shouldn't. Sorry. And then so he says, I could go over there so she doesn't have to leave or take the bus or whatever, and I'll just take a ton of Benadryl and sleep while you write. And she's like, yeah, we could do that. So it's like, okay, you want to be taken care of and you appreciate the support from him, but you're not willing to do things like this, and him having allergies that he can't control is annoying to you. And it makes me doubly sad because we know that they used to like keep each other company and hang out when they were sick, when they were kids. And it's probably just something that he likes, and that's comforting. Like, that's just cute. And that's why I can just never actually accept this book as canon, because Jelly deserved so much better than this. And I saw people talking about this and they were like, oh my gosh, Conrad would never. And I'm like, Conrad would never what? Have allergies? Belly didn't like when Conrad pushed her away and was nasty to her when he was vulnerable or needed something or even had to communicate a little bit. And that is why this book remains a joke, because the things we're supposed to take as signs that Belly and Jeremiah are not meant to be are the most irrelevant things and only serve to make Belly look ridiculous and awful. Like, even here, these are the things she can come up with that annoy her about Jeremiah. He has allergies. How obnoxious he is when he smokes Redacted with his friends and they eat pineapple and ham pizza and listen to music and laugh. Oh, the horror! What obnoxious, sinister behavior from a teenage boy. And then this annoyed me too, when she's talking about how Jeremiah has a lot of friends and they hang out with his friends a lot. And that in a way it makes sense because he already has them. And this one time she gets invited to this party and she wants Jeremiah to come too. And he says that he has an intramural soccer game, but she should go anyway. And instead of just saying, like, I wanted you to come because this was like important to me and I feel like we always hang out with your friends and I want you to hang out with my friends more. I'm sure he would have been more than accommodating, but instead of just saying that, she says, can't you just miss it? It's not like it's a real game. Like, the only thing that would allude to Belly and Clownrad being meant to be in this book is that they both get nasty and start poking at people's insecurities instead of communicating. Anyway, I hate this book. Jared just needed some Flonase and some love and a hug, and I really would like to believe that Belly would just do that. Like, are you kidding? Another thing that really annoys me about book 3 and people talking about it is the anti-Jeremiah propaganda where people will always be like, Jeremiah was always showing up late and not showing up to wedding planning things, when that's literally false and it's based on this one stupid Michaels incident in which he literally was not even late. And once again, I do not think that they should have been getting married at this point. I think that whole plotline is so stupid and very off-brand for both of them. However, it was not a manipulative, sinister act from Jeremiah. Belly was 100% for it and even adamant about it. And he literally was trying. Jeremiah is not perfect, but Belly literally was not giving, and we have to admit that. Certainly not showing up. Anyway, mind you, Jeremiah has an internship that he's at every day, and they have already discussed this, and he literally even asked Belly if she thinks that he should quit, and she was like, no, you can't. Ghost Rad conveniently has nothing better to do than haunt the house, and he's staying in the summer house, and so is Belly. Jeremiah is literally not staying there, mind you. And Belly and Jeremiah are going to go to Michael's to get vases and whatever, right? And so she's sitting there with her binder, her stupid binder, as Conrad says, and she's like, Jared's stuck in city traffic. I told him to leave earlier. I really needed his help today. And just wait for it. But anyway, Corny is like, well, I can go with you. And Belly jumps at the chance to go with Cornstarch, which, okay, I guess that's fair enough. She was stressed out and anxious about it. Okay, fine. But then they get back and Jeremiah is there and he's not angry or anything, but he says, where have you guys been? And Belly says, at Michael's. What time did you get here? And he says, a little while ago. Why didn't you wait for me? I told you I'd be here in time. And then she says, I told you Michael's closes at 9. I doubt you would have made it in time. And she sounds pissed. But then after that, she literally says it's after 8. Not even it's 8:30 or it's close to 9. It's after 8 and Jeremiah has already been there for a while. So he was there on time. Like, okay, fine. She got stressed out and wanted to go with Dirt Rad. Of course she did. But I'm pretty sure he wasn't just leisurely hanging around his internship for pleasure. But then she literally brings it up again and is like, I was still mad at him for not being there in time to go to Michael's with me. Like, this book is so stupid and this is what you're dragging him for? I really can't. Like, this book is just so dumb and the way people talk about it is so annoying and Belly's so insufferable and I just hate it so much.
So this new information about Petra Collins and Euphoria is actually so much sadder than I initially thought. Because according to her, Sam Levinson actually reached out to her to explicitly invite her to LA to direct Euphoria and told her that he wrote it based on her photographs. Like this photo of Barbie Ferreira, which was on Petra Collins' Instagram in 2017. And it's so obvious because all of her photographs, especially from this era, look like they could be stills from Euphoria. Like, she has such a distinct and stunning aesthetic that was so clearly the inspiration for all of Euphoria. And she says she did the casting for Euphoria, which when you look at her body of work, she's been working with these people for years before Euphoria came out. Like, this excerpt from an interview she gave is particularly devastating because she talks about the fact that, you know, she spent all this time, 5 months, developing this series with HBO that Sam Levinson apparently explicitly told her was based on her work. And they told her that she didn't have enough experience, she was too young, and she just assumed that they were not going to continue with the project, or at least not in the vein that it had been being developed in the style of her work and based on her work. And the way that she found out was walking out of her apartment and seeing a billboard. That's how she found out. And apparently, probably because she's not credited for Euphoria at all, people apparently tell her all the time that her work reminds them of Euphoria. How fucking infuriating would that be? The quote here is just so devastating. She says, "It was so intense to me because this is the aesthetic I built all my life, and now I have to change it because it enters the mainstream and it's been taken away from me." Like, that's so fucking devastating. Honestly, I was so unbelievably mad about The Idol and Amy Seimetz. This might even be worse. Like, it's all bad. Okay, this is the last update I have about the Euphoria, Sam Levinson, Petra Collins thing. The quote that I cited in my last video, yes, it is very hard to find on the internet. The quote that talks about how she was invited by Sam Levinson specifically, and he told her that Euphoria, he wrote a story based on her photographs, and he told her that he wanted her to direct, and she worked with HBO for 5 months, and she didn't know even that when she was let go because they told her she was too inexperienced, that they were going to keep going with her vision, the world that she built, and the cast that she apparently put together, allegedly. That quote was originally in this article. Yes, there are typos in the screenshot that I showed. That's because this is a Hungarian website. It's called punkt.hu. They publish in English as well, so I'm assuming that's why the typos come in. But here's what's interesting. When you search for that quote, it doesn't come up anymore because it's been removed from this article. Now, I used the Wayback Machine to go and see an earlier version of this article from January of this year, and the quote is there. Not only is the quote there, but Petra did not even bring up Euphoria. In fact, the interviewer told her that her work is inspired by contemporary culture and that Euphoria seems to have been inspired by the aesthetic of her work, and does she see the similarities? That's where Petra Collins gets into, "I'll tell you the truth about the series that was never told." This is her full quote that is the answer to that question, and the last time the Wayback Machine has record of this appearing on this website was on June 10th. As of today, there's a new entry being saved of the new version of the article, which has both the question the interviewer asked her and this removed. So I don't know when exactly this article was edited, and I don't have enough information to speculate like specifically when or why, but as of right now, when this conversation is circulating, the article is not the original version of the article. I'm just going to say again, I'm not the primary source for any of this information. I found all of this information publicly from credible publications on the internet, and I can't speak to the truth of first-person accounting in any of this. I'm just relaying the information that was published already.
The thing about Drew Barrymore's apology video, I, like a lot of people, have a lot of respect for Drew Barrymore, for both what she's accomplished and what she's been through, and the fact that she's been able to seemingly maintain, a relatively grounded and empathetic approach to life and humanity. I think it's very impressive. But the thing about that video, and I don't even want to call it an apology video because that's not what it is. Saying the words "I'm sorry" and doing nothing, it means nothing. It's self-serving, it's performative, you get to cry on camera and show us that you feel bad, that you made other people feel bad. You should feel bad. There's a huge difference between saying, "I'm sorry, people got hurt, I feel bad about it," and "I'm sorry, I did something wrong. I'm taking accountability by changing my actions." That's what accountability is. It's just so apparent that no matter how relatable and empathetic and kind a celebrity, a very, very wealthy person seems, there's a certain level of power that removes your even capacity for understanding what accountability truly is. I also think it's really insidious to bring up things like COVID and to use terminology that a lot of her audience is not really well versed in what's going on with the strikes. A lot of people still have this mindset of big shot Hollywood actors being greedy and asking for more money, when that's not at all what this is. This is a catastrophically vital and long overdue labor movement that is permeating every single industry in the United States. It's the Hollywood sector is getting a lot of attention with SAG and the WGA and even the VFX industries voting to unionize, but the auto industry just went on strike for the first time in fucking history. The poverty levels in this country have skyrocketed. People cannot afford groceries. The wealth divide in this country is disgusting, and that's what this is about. The wealth disparity in Hollywood is a great example. It's a great visual example, but it's everywhere. This isn't fucking COVID. They're not comparable at all. And aside the fact of having the audacity to jump on here as a literal Barrymore and say, "What could I possibly do to help? There's nothing I could do. My hands are tied." Are you serious? But even more so than that, like to insinuate, to outright say that your show is more important, that the value you provide to people in these hard times is what you're doing it for. Baby, no. Like, you are perpetuating the systems that created these hard times. Like, as a rule, even if you weren't just blatantly aligning yourselves with the villains of this story and your own writers weren't picketing your show, not one person, not one TV show, not a single thing is more individually important than this incredibly important movement that is happening right now to help people, to dismantle these systems that are literally killing us. This is exactly why we say eat the rich, because no matter how likably they present themselves, like, they consistently choose their own comfort over our literal survival. And then they try to sell it back to us like they're doing us a fucking favor, like they're the heroes of this story. Like, it's sickening, honestly. And there's still time, you know, for Drew Barrymore to hopefully at some point see the error of her ways for these multiple hosts that are coming back. Maybe they will. At this point, I'm losing hope. But don't fall for the bullshit. And don't let other people fall for it either. Like, tell people, talk to people about how fucked up this is, because they're trying to sell themselves to people who aren't as knowledgeable about this, and that's who they're trying to justify themselves to, and it's gross.
Remember the woman that was going to direct The Idol before she was replaced by Sam Levinson? I mean, technically, she did direct a lot of The Idol. Like, 90% of the footage was done of her version. They just scrapped it, and we got those beautiful behind-the-scenes image leaked of, like, what it could have been. Well, she's an incredible filmmaker, and I want to tell you about one of her best films that you should be watching in honor of spooky season. She Dies Tomorrow is like a very emotional psychedelic mystery thriller, and it's distributed by the awesome indie house Neon, who I adore. And the premise is a woman goes over to her friend's house and very nonchalantly kind of tells her that she knows she's going to die the following day, and like gives her some instructions on what she wants done with her body. Now, her friend is understandably very worried that she's having some kind of mental health break, or that she's fallen off the wagon and is like drinking again because has a history of alcoholism. But the film is a lot more complicated than that. It uses nonlinear storytelling and an unreliable narrator and these very like trippy visuals to kind of make the viewer question what's actually happening at all times. And it's not strictly a horror film per se, but it's a film that like uniquely disturbed me and moved me in a way similar to like Melancholia by Lars von Trier. I feel like the horror genre has a lot of popularity because it makes life seem less scary. It kind of taps into the physical fears that we don't really face every day to distract us from the existential dread of like knowing that we're all going to die, that everyone we love is going to die, that all of this is going to be over, and everything we're doing in the meantime could be interpreted as futile. But what's so beautiful about this film is that it does confront that idea and how isolating it feels and how terrifying it feels, but that it's also a universal experience. It's honestly such a fantastic and unique watch. It'll make you feel so many different things. It's tense and beautiful and horrifying and moving. I really think that this film is something special, and Amy Seimetz is so talented, so you should check it out if you get a chance. And if you like horror and all types of spooky cinema, this is part of my spooky cinema series I do every October, where I recommend new spooky cinema every single day. Tomorrow we're gonna get back to some more international spooky films, so I will see you then. So let's talk about the rise of girl-splaining and bimbo feminism. I'm obviously somebody who cares a lot about the way women are represented in media, and I think that these things are actually very important. They can impact culture and public perception, and even though these things might seem silly and fun, I think they're actually a lot more dangerous and insidious than people want to admit. I'm not trying to like shit on anybody's fun. I know on the internet we like to have our silly little jokes, and a lot of them are not meant to be taken more seriously than that. But the problem is if you bring this like memification, this like absurdity to something that actually requires a lot of nuance and a very serious tone, then you run the risk of trivializing the very thing you're trying to supposedly educate on. And also, once you put something out there, you lose the ability to control how it's perceived by other people, or if it's going to be used to reinforce ideologies that you don't necessarily align with. And the thing is, I think the trajectory of this trend is very interesting, but also very telling, because when I first started noticing it really taking off, it was like a lot of women trying to mock crypto bros, and specifically the way that crypto bros see and treat women, playing into their baseline instincts, like playing the dumb girl, comparing things that they think are very serious to like Kohl's Cash, which is funny and really taps into a level of humor that is specific to women, but it's also at its core self-deprecating and reinforcing this idea in men's mind that women are too stupid to understand their complex interests. I mean, the idea that women as a demographic specifically would need any of these concepts like dumbed down or reduced to like more relatable or accessible language is already like completely off, considering the fact that female students have been outperforming male students for a long time, and women represent a larger demographic of college educated adults than men. And therein lies the crux of the issue, right? Because what started out as like a joke between women about the ways that men routinely demean us, and like our little own form of rebellion being to try and just frustrate them in response, turned into like spreading this idea that women actually don't understand these things and we need them simplified to an insane level in order to understand. Women don't need like crypto or football or the stock market explained to us. These aren't like lofty, unattainable concepts that we can't wrap our feminine brains around. We don't explicitly know a lot about them because we don't care to. And I know that there's nuance here, and I know that there are like different reasons why women might identify with or validate these kinds of trends. And for example, like I don't have an issue with girl math. I know that some people think it's harmful. I personally think it speaks more to the fact that in addition to like bearing the vast majority of the load of like domestic labor in this country, like a lot of women are actually taking on a lot of the economic responsibility and like personal finance responsibility. And I think that it's like a funny way of acknowledging the intense amount of like emotional labor that women put into like running a financial household. But the thing is, as women, even when we're like making jokes, I don't know a single woman who hasn't at some point in her life made a joke to a man and that man has simply thought she was stupid. That is the perception that a lot of men take away from these like jokes that we're perpetuating about the entire idea of womanhood. So what I would encourage you to think about is at the end of the day, who is this for? Who is this benefiting? It's just concerning to me that this trend seemed to start out as like a joke between women. And now it seems to be encouraging women to embrace a simpler and less threatening ideal of womanhood that appeals more to men and goes hand in hand with like traditionalism and anti-intellectualism that are in themselves like stepping stones to fascism. And I think, unfortunately, part of it is a natural reaction to women being on average more educated than men and finding themselves in situations where the men that they are around wish that they weren't. So embracing these trends might feel empowering in like a have your cake and eat it too kind of way. It doesn't matter if the men don't know you're joking. You're in on it and they're not. Like, let them laugh at you. What does it really matter? I mean, to me, that just feels like a hop, skip, and a jump away from washing your Klonopin down with a martini and putting on a pretty dress before your husband gets home. Like, I just think that we're walking a dangerous line, and I think we need to be aware. Also, we're educated enough to know better, okay? We're educated enough to know that if you really want to learn about something that's actually important, you can take the time to do that. You don't have to dumb it down to stupid terms and pretend like that's girlsplaining.